Hi, everybody. I'm here with Natalie Coldiron from Coldiron Law, and we're talking about an important topic in real estate, and that is a survey. So, hi, Natalie. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mairead.
What is a survey?
A survey is a drawing. It depicts the boundary lines of the property. There are different types of surveys. There are topographic surveys that might be used for building a new home. There's an as-built survey that you'll see after new construction. It'll show where the final structure has been built. It's a major part of the buyer's due diligence. It shows the buyer whether there are any encroachments on the property of the structure into a setback or an easement or even off the lot line.
Generally speaking, I know some surveys are very expensive, but what can a typical buyer expect for a survey cost?
It depends on whether the property's meets and bounds or acreage or waterfront. I would say generally most often on lot and blocks, I'm seeing $300 to $500 for large parcel of vacant land. It could be a few $1,000s if the buyer is building and needs a wetland delineation or some other form of topographic survey. It could cost upwards of $10,000. So it depends on the property.
Yeah. So I run into this a lot, but cash buyers in particular will say, I don't need a survey and I don't need title insurance. And maybe we'll have you back to talk about title insurance because that's a whole other topic. But why do you think a cash buyer in particular needs a survey?
I hear that often as well, and usually after I explain how important it is, the buyer will understand this is such a major part of your due diligence.
Yep.
A lender requires surveys. If they're important enough for a lender, that speaks volumes about why you need one as well. Whether the property's new construction or it's a resale that was built in the 80s or 90s, every single home needs a survey that's accurate. A survey where no changes have been made to the footprint of the property since the survey has been drawn. Often we'll ask the sellers if the seller has an existing survey. If they do, we can often use that survey for title insurance purposes. So we try to save the buyer money as best we can,
Right.
But the importance of having an accurate survey is critical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about survey exceptions on the title commitment?
Yes, every title commitment will contain a standard exception for matters that would have been shown on an accurate survey, and the only way to delete that exception from the title insurance policy is to get a new survey or to have an accurate survey. When I say an exception, I mean an exception from title insurance coverage. If you're paying for title insurance, you want maximum coverage, so you want that exception deleted from the title policy.
What are some survey defects that you've seen on both old properties and new construction?
I see most often that when the surveys were drawn, they didn't include setbacks from the recorded HOA restrictions. That's an extra step that many closing agents don't take to make certain that the surveyor draws in the deed-restricted setbacks. I see most often that the structure or the pool are encroaching into setbacks. Those are relatively easy to fix as far as encroachments go. You can often get a variance signed by the HOA. That's a recorded document that fixes it permanently, so that's a great fix. Every now and then, and there are a few communities locally that do this, where the HOA restrictions won't allow the HOA to grant a variance. Instead, you have to modify the restrictions, and that might require us walking the streets, getting a certain percentage of homeowners to sign off on a notarized document.
And that's another reason why you need a survey, because you wouldn't know this until you sell the property.
You want to know that before you purchase the property, not
yeah.
when you go to sell the property. Another typical encroachment that I see is an encroachment into an easement. Those are much harder to fix. In order to fix an encroachment into an easement, you might have to get a vacation of the easement from the city or county or municipality. Those can be expensive, they can take a long time, and they're not guaranteed.
Yeah.
So that's a more costly issue.
What are the survey deadlines on a contract? I know I close every transaction I can with you because you're so thorough.
I appreciate that.
But I mean, I think it's something that buyers kind of gloss over, but there are important milestones in that contract.
I see often that buyers don't want to order surveys until after the inspection period has passed. I caution against doing that. You only have so many days to object to survey defects, and especially during rainy season, it could take a couple of weeks to get a survey in. The deadline to get a new survey is generally 5 days prior to closing. But the tricky part is if the seller has given to you an existing survey, you have 5 days after receipt of that survey to object to title defects. Most don't know that, and most don't look at it right away. So it's important to get that survey into the hands of an attorney as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So that you don't miss that 5-day deadline to object to defects.
And that leads me into our last question. I mean, why is it important to hire an attorney to review a survey?
It's important to hire an attorney for multiple reasons. For the one I mentioned first, to make sure that the surveyor is given a copy of the title commitment so that they will draw in those HOA setbacks. Or if you're using an existing survey, an attorney, if they're as OCD as I am, will review the recorded restrictions on their own to make sure that there's nothing missing from the seller's existing survey. An attorney will help properly and timely object to survey defects on a proper format instead of just putting it in the file and moving on. An attorney will take that liability off of you and explain the options to the client. That's critical, whether to go forward on a variance or vacation of the easement, or maybe the buyer wants to negotiate a purchase price reduction, and then they'll take their chances post-closing. We've seen that before.
A significant price reduction we were able to achieve just by that,
That's right.
Yeah, so it really does. That survey cost saved my client a ton of money because of your thorough review.
I appreciate that. An attorney is also available to prepare a variance or a vacation of the easement. And then finally, and I think most importantly, an attorney will make sure that that exception from coverage on the title policy will be deleted. If the buyer is going to pay for that survey, the buyer wants that title insurance coverage. That last step is very important.
If you have any questions about surveys, you can find Natalie's contact details below, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, Mairead. Thank you for having me.